Welcome to Tales on the Towpath, the podcast where every mile tells a story.
We're two runners who spend a lot of time out here on the C&O Canal Towpath, talking about training, racing, and everything that happens between the miles.
From early morning runs to the stories that keep us moving.
This is where endurance meets inspiration, one step, one tail at a time.
So lace up and join us on the path, because every trail has a story, and this one's ours.
I am Adam Lowe.
And I'm Chris Earle. Today, we want to talk about a couple of things that have happened. There was a big race that happened over the last couple of weekends. For those of you who are familiar with the backyard ultra marathon format, basically the Super Bowl of that event format happened, the Big's Backyard. Adam, you want to talk about what we took away from the race and go from there?
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with the backyard format, the backyard format starts on the hour, every hour, and runners go out and they complete a 4.167 mile loop. If they finish in 59 minutes and they get back, they have 1 minute to get their stuff together and get ready to go back out and start another lap. If they finish in 35 minutes, they have 25 minutes to sleep, recover, eat, whatever they need to do before the next lap starts, or in the backyard, they call them yards. So after the yard is complete, all the runners gather back at the starting line if they're able to continue, and they go out for another yard. Going into this weekend, the world record was 119 yards, which is, you guys are both better at math than I am, but I think it's just short of 500 miles altogether. So these guys were doing almost 5 full days of 4.167 mile loops at that time. So backyard ultras, you cannot have aid on the course. Whatever you can get in that little bit of time after your run is what you get. So it's very taxing on the body for sure, and usually a lack of sleep is what gets most of these runners in. For the backyard that just happened in Tennessee, the backyard ultra, Phil Gore of Australia, it was able to win again with 114 yards, and it's Steyart of Belgium was the assist. So those were the top two guys. And Chris, did you read anything interesting on Phil or Ivo or Harvey Lewis or any of those guys that were in the race?
Yeah, one of the things I found most interesting is the different strategies that some of the runners took with respect to how much rest they were looking to get for each yard. Prior to this weekend, the strategy I was familiar with is you wanted to finish in that 52 to 56 minutes per yard. So you had just enough time to get a little bit of hydration, get a little bit of fuel, and then get back out and run the next yard without having time for the body to tighten up and stiffen up and all those kinds of things that can happen when you stop running. Phil Gore, though, he took a very different approach to this, and many of the laps he went out and he was knocking out that 4.167 miles in 35 to 37 minutes, which gave him roughly 20 to 25 minutes of time to actually sleep. And so he was crouching out in his chair there in his tent in between yards. Some of the articles I mentioned even spoke about them using hypnosis to get him to fall asleep quicker. So I'm not real sure how that works, but like if I'm ever crewing for someone doing a backyard format, I'll get my big pocket watch out and dangle it in front of them and see if I can help them get a few minutes extra sleep.
That might come in handy in March for me.
But I really did think that was interesting, right? I can't imagine miles in or 400 miles into one of these races and then still going out and running sub 9 minute miles so that you can come back and take a quick nap before the next yard.
Right. Now, one thing I did not mention was that a lot of these backyard ultras, they have a day loop and a night loop. So the day loop is usually on trail, so a little bit more difficult to run. You got to watch your footing a little bit more. And then the night loop is generally on road. So it is possible to go a little bit faster on the road part, and that's what I believe Phil was doing. He was trying to bank that sleep time and make sure he could get back in about 35, 40 minutes. And then he was sleeping for a good amount of that time. Have you seen
Yeah.
that? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, the one thing that was fun about watching the leaderboard throughout the race was they also posted which lap was their fastest and their slowest. And for Phil's, I believe his fastest lap was the lap going into mile 400, where he ran it in 35 and change. Just absolutely incredible to run eight somethings per mile at that deep into a race.
Right. And then did you see? I know I mentioned his name a little bit ago, but Harvey Lewis, he set a personal record with 111 yards. And so that was his best. And I know we've talked about he ended up in the hospital with a couple broken ribs, I believe. You're the one that told me that. So go ahead. You probably know a little bit more about that than I do.
Yeah, he fell on one of the laps and he went down pretty hard and he knew that it hurt. Of course, everything hurts that deep into that kind of race. So he got up and he finished the yard and then proceeded to run 12 more yards. So another 12 hours, 50 miles before he finally was unable to complete a yard in the 1 hour allotted time. And a couple days later, decided he needed to take himself to the emergency room because his ribs were not feeling any better, and actually spent a couple days in there because I guess there was potentially the possibility of some fluid building up and they were worried about having to possibly do some surgery. Unfortunately, as a result of that, that ended up ending his running streak. I don't know the exact number of days, but he had quite a long one going. But it sounds like he's going to be okay, and we wish him the best on a speedy recovery. So,
I think he started his streak in 2012, I believe. So it's a pretty long
wow.
streak there. And then I also saw that Phil Gore was on crutches for the last couple of days. So he messed up a leg muscle or something. He had a run streak going as well that has now stopped because of going all out. And then, not to be outdone, I don't know if you watched any of the live feed or not, but Ivan, who had the assist, I think he ran the last, it seemed to like 40 yards with a really bad lean to one side. And they kept trying to adjust his back. And man, he looked tough out. So it's amazing what these three guys were willing and able to put their bodies through in order to, get one more yard and just keep going. All right. Before we maybe jump to another topic, I also wanted to mention for sure that the female record for backyard was broken, and Megan Eckert of the U.S. was the second female. She broke her record, and then Sarah Perry of the U.K. set the female record with 95 yards. So I think within a year or two, we'll definitely see a female get to that elusive 100-yard mark, which is nothing short of extraordinary.
Yeah, it's just absolutely incredible. I think these ultra super long distance events, are the great equalizer when it comes to the advantages men have at the shorter distances over women. I believe a woman has actually won Big's Backyard a couple of times in the past.
Yep.
It's just awesome to see that kind of strength and power and endurance come through.
Yeah, so that was Big's backyard. I mean, it started Saturday morning. I was checking in on the live feed every once in a while, and then all the way through Wednesday, checking the live feed and seeing what's going on. So pretty interesting 5 days of running at Big's backyard.
Pretty amazing to think that we slept 4 nights in the time that they continued running.
Yeah, absolutely. And while we're on the topic of Big's backyard, just so everybody knows, if they're interested in trying this format, we do have a backyard ultra right here in Maryland. We're all three of us are in West Virginia right now, but the race is in Maryland. It's in Knoxville, Maryland, right near the Sharpsburg area. And it takes place May 30th. It is called the More Miles Last One Standing. And we have a 1 mile event that runners do 1 mile every hour on the hour for 24 hours. And then after that, they go into a tiebreaker mode. So then they do 2 miles, 3 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles, 6 miles until no one can complete their miles in that hour. And then we have a traditional 4.167 mile loop. Based on where it is, we only have one trail loop. It's Chris has run it twice, so he can speak to the difficulty of the trail. I know last year we had the first time of getting runners over the 100-mile mark. Our winner was Samir, who we just talked about on the last podcast, who won Buzz Sawyer. He ran 108 total miles, pushing it over a day. Is that correct? 24. Yeah.
That's
26
correct.
hours. Right. Okay. I'll do the math there real quick. So, but Chris, yeah, I'll let you talk about the course real quick and then we'll jump to the next topic.
Yeah, it's a great course. It's a great event for those that are backyard curious. You, like Adam said, you've got the 1 mile version for those that aren't ready to jump in and commit to that almost full hour of running every hour on the hour. But for the 4.167-mile course, it's really a good course. You start off at the campground and you immediately turn into the woods, and you've got some rolling hills, but the trail is really well maintained, very few rocks, very few roots. It's runnable all the way through. There's been a lot of debate in the local running community about whether or not you even need trail shoes. I know Katie has some strong thoughts on that. We'll let her maybe talk about that in a second. But it's got it's got enough elevation gain that you're going to feel it. But it's a real fun out and back course. And, much like we were talking about last week with the Buzz Sawyer, one of the great things about that course is with the out and back, you get to see everybody who's competing. You get to keep track of your friends, get to encourage each other along the way. And then you all meet back up at the campground, get a quick bite to eat and rehydrate, and back out we go.
Yeah, it is. The backyard is a very unique event, right? Like it's almost like a brand new race every yard. And, if we're running a marathon, we might see each other in passing real quick. But at Bigs or at the more miles, every four miles, we come back together and you're back in the same group and you're starting again. And I know a lot of people, like that, where they get to talk to somebody different. They get to run with multiple people. So it is, a unique type of race for sure.
And
Gonna
I learned
throw
a
in
ton. Oh, go ahead, Katie.
just that it's a very community feel. The more you got, I have not done the 4.167 option. I've run the course, but not in the actual event. But just watching it from a race director and a supporter side of it, everybody gets to be cheering for each other and wants them to keep going. When somebody wants to stop, all the other competitors are saying, no, just one more, just one more. I believe, Adam, you showed me a clip of Harvey Lewis even pulling a runner back into the box to get started at the Bigs Backyard Ultra.
Yeah,
So
so well, I was gonna say, so yeah, the runner crossed the finish line and then in like 59:57, so he had 3 seconds to turn around and get back in the box. If he would have kept running, he would have missed it, and then he would not have been able to start the next loop. So Harvey actually reached out, grabbed his arm, and pulled him back in. And I don't know of many other races where you would help a competitor stay in the race longer so that you had to work harder to beat them. So it's just an amazing event. And I should have also mentioned that with this, there's only one finisher. Everybody else gets a DNF. So if you run, like the guy that got the assist at 113 yards, he gets a did not finish. So if that, that seems kind of harsh, but he didn't finish the race. So in order for Phil to win, he had to run one more yard than the next guy. And it doesn't matter how much energy Phil had left, the race is over once everybody else drops out. So that was another reason why Harvey grabbed the other guy's arm, because they need each other to push each other even further. So it's pretty cool, concept for a race. And just so our listeners aren't thrown off a little bit, that was Katie Lowe. She is on the podcast right now. She's gonna jump in here in a couple of minutes and talk about her Marine Corps marathon that we just had last weekend. So she's been on listening. We just hadn't formally introduced her yet today.
but you did mention that there were three of us, so I thought I'd
Oh, okay.
jump in and make myself known.
Perfect. All right. So I think that concludes our wrap up from Big's Backyard and a little bit about the Backyard Ultra. Real quick, I wanted just to shout out. I know this wasn't on our list of things, but when Chris and I are out there on the towpath we're running, I normally jump up and say random things anyway. So I'm going to do that now. So there was another big race this weekend, and it was the Javelina 100. So I just wanted to give a shout out because there were two big course records that were set. Tara Dower set the women's course record, 13 hours, 31 minutes, and 47 seconds. That's 8:07 per mile for 100 miles. And she beat the old course record by 31 minutes. So she just destroyed it. And then Will Murray ran 12 hours and 10 minutes. That's 7 minutes and 18 seconds per mile. So if just go out tomorrow and run a 7:18 mile, and then just imagine holding that 99 straight times after that. And that was his pace to set the new men's course record for the Javelina 100. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Just if you're wondering what else might be going on in the ultra world, it was a pretty big weekend for that race to have two course records for sure.
And
Hey, Adam,
amazingly, those paces include stops and aid and all the
Yeah.
things they might have to do. That's crazy.
Right.
Absolutely. Hey, Adam, we should also give a big shout out to Caleb Bowen, who runs with us virtually through the Too Low Run Distance challenges every couple of months. For those of you who don't know, Caleb, he is the head cross country coach and distance track coach at Marshall University. And he lives here in West Virginia with us. And he finished, I believe, 5th overall.
Yep.
So way to go, Caleb.
Yeah, I think it was just over 13 hours and 8 minutes. I think if I remember that correctly. So yeah, another incredible time. A couple years ago, definitely probably it would have won the race, at that time, but another incredible performance for sure. Kind of hoping, I don't want to put him on a spot here, but I was kind of hoping he was going to come to JFK and cheer his buddy Dan Green on, but I have no idea if that's going to happen. So don't hold me to that. But
Maybe we can get him an entry for next year.
yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and talk about Marine Corps Marathon. So on Saturday, Chris, Katie, Megan, and I went to the expo, and that was an adventure itself. We don't need to spend too much time on the traffic getting into the expo or the traffic we saw when we left the expo. But the expo itself was pretty fun as far as I was concerned. We got our bibs, we got our shirts, we got some free goodies, and we walked around for a little while. I was fairly happy with it. It seemed like everybody was high spirits and the energy was up. We saw a good amount of people that we knew. We saw Mario, Julie, a few others. So if you guys have anything you want to add about Saturday, have at it.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that once we got through the traffic, that was the nightmare that is DC Beltway traffic. It was a really good experience. The flow of people through the expo from check-in to check-out was really quick. Lots of great things to be able to poke around and look at, but also if you forgot some hydration or you forgot some gels, like easy to get restocked up. And so I thought it was a good experience and was really happy with it, just like you said.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump into Sunday morning. Chris, I'll let you go first and maybe start us off a little bit with the logistics of getting to the start line. If you want to.
Yeah, so I will be the first to admit when it comes to these big races, right? When you pay that big entry fee, I didn't want to get stuck with that huge hotel bill. I did some research and looked around and found that if we got out to the northern side of the Beltway, the hotel prices dropped off pretty quickly. So there's a secret for anybody who isn't tracking that if you want to attend the Marine Corps Marathon and want to spend a fraction of what hotels near the start line cost, look just a little bit farther out. But we ended up staying out near Tyson's, and so we were right on the Silver Line, which meant we were going to have a little bit longer of a metro ride in. But for my cheapo, I was willing to risk it, and Katie joined us out there. Initially getting on the Silver Line was super easy. We were up at 5 a.m. out in the dark, walking our way down to the Metro line and got on that first train, and pretty smooth sailing until we got to Roslyn, where we had to switch trains and basically jam in with everyone else who was also trying to get to the Pentagon. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I have never experienced public transportation like that. Literally, we were as jammed into that train car as you could be. You know, some of the people didn't even hold on to the rails as the train was starting and stopping because you weren't going to fall. There were just too many people around you. I don't know. What do you guys think about all that?
I was thoroughly overwhelmed. I have never experienced Marine Corps. I've not had to ride public transportation to a start line ever. This was all new. And so I was just along for the ride. I didn't know where we were staying. I didn't know how close it was to the start line. I do know Adam said the public transit starts at 5 a.m. and we need to be there. And I'm thinking, oh, what? Why would we have to be on the very first train? But he's like, no, we will regret it. We may not make it if we're not there on the first train. And then it was just too crowded when we did the switchover to get on the next train that went through. So we had to wait for the second one. I was overwhelmed, but I was just trying to trust the process and that we'd make it. I figured all these people, thousands and thousands of people are headed to the same place. Surely we'll make it, right? Not knowing the ignorance is bliss kind of thing helped me out because I didn't know to be too worried. But as we got closer and it took, I don't know, just the time seemed to go so fast that all of a sudden, oh my gosh, it's 20 minutes still. We're supposed to start. That's when it hit. Oh, okay, we need to get over there. But
So-
finding restrooms, are we on that part too? Like there were hundreds of porta potties, but long lines at
Well,
every single one
let
of them.
me-
So I didn't even.
Let me back up a little bit. So I don't want to scare anybody away from Marine Corps because I've run it. This was my 11th time, and this was way more packed than any other year because it was the 50th anniversary and they let in 10,000 more people. So next year, I expect it to be a lot less packed. I expect the Metro to be much easier than it was this year. With that being said, it was pretty stressful. So, like Katie said, she didn't have all the information, and that was so that she didn't get stressed, and then therefore I wasn't double stressed with that. So, but I did know that if we didn't get on that first train, we would have been in trouble. And then when we got to Roslyn, I knew if we didn't get on that next train, we were going to be in trouble. There was a 15-minute gap, I think, between trains. And when that next one pulled up, it was already full. I don't know how we even got on. It was pretty full when it pulled up. So that was, that part was stressful. We get off the train at the Pentagon, and it's about a mile walk to Runners Village. And we got to Runners Village around 6:45. I do want to back up and give Metro a pat on the back. They did not make us scan our card when we left the Metro, which probably saved us a half hour. I mean, because we know how it is when people are out of town, don't know what they're doing. There's thousands of people trying to get out. So, they did come through and make sure we got out of the station pretty quickly. But, making that mile walk to Runners Village, we passed porta potties that already had a huge line, got to Runners Village. It seemed like everybody was in line for the bathroom. There was 1,000 plus porta potties and the lines were huge. So Chris and I found trees. I don't know what else to say, and went to the bathroom and, but we made our way to the UPS baggage trucks, dropped our bags off, and then we walked right to the start line. We didn't have time to play around or really talk to anybody or anything. So that part was pretty stressful. And then I know I got to my spot at the start line at about 7:05 and the race started at 7:20. So pretty close, closer than I would have liked it to been for sure.
Yeah, similar experience from we basically, when we got off the train, we really didn't stop moving the whole time until we got to the starting corrals. And I think when I looked at my watch the first time, when I felt like I had finally gotten to where I needed to be at the start of the race, I had 9 minutes before the howitzer was going to go off. So I was like,
Yeah.
man, Adam was so right that if we had missed one train in that sequence,
Yeah.
we would have been running to the starting line instead of walking.
Can I ask, how long do they keep the start line open? Because in seeing so many other people's results, I did see a girl that had finished, and I looked at her finishing time and I said, oh my gosh, we finished about 30 seconds apart from each other. And Adam was like, I bet you ran together the whole time. And then I looked at her starting time on Strava, and it was 20 minutes after I started. And I came through the starting line 5 minutes after the gun. About 7:20 is when 7:25 is when I went through, and her starting time was like 7:43. So do they keep the starting line open for a long time, or?
Yeah, I would estimate it was probably open until just before 8 o'clock, I would imagine. Especially, they this is probably the first time ever that Marine Corps did bib pickup in Runners Village, because people couldn't pick up their bibs due to traffic in DC. So, and again, that's not normal. The porta potty lines that we saw, that's not normal. The having no time. I've had years where I've laid in Runners Village for 30 minutes and like almost went back to sleep before the race. And it just wasn't meant to be on Sunday due to the amount of people there.
I will add too that the one thing most people didn't probably know, and why the lines were so long in Runners Village, is there were porta potties all the way up through along the starting corrals, and the lines there were very short. People were in and out very quickly. But I think it's because most people were afraid they were going to get up to the starting line and there would be nowhere to take care of business. So
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, so I mean, that part, we probably walked. So this is all obviously Sunday morning before the race. We woke up at 4:15, whatever, 4:15, 4:20, hop on the metro. We had to walk probably half mile to the metro. We walked a mile to Runners Village, another half mile to the start. So 2 miles walking, that I don't think that's an exaggeration. I think it's pretty close. We've already been awake for 3 hours by the time the race starts. So, it's pretty stressful. It's not like going to the start of Buzz Sawyer where you drive, you park your car, and you walk out. You go, if you're cold, you sit in your car until 3 minutes before the race starts, and then you jog 100 feet and you're at the start line. So it's a pretty big difference. We were blessed with some good weather for that amount of walking. But yeah, so before the gun goes off, we're probably 2 miles of walking on our legs. Stressful. It's almost a relief when the gun goes off. Like you made it, you're there, you were ready, and the gun goes off, and now all you have to do is run. So that's kind of the way I looked at it. We all had goals going in. We talked about those on the last podcast. I think before we go into our race here, we should maybe talk about our goal, what it was again, real quick. So I made the goal of 2:51:08. I think to beat Samir is what I said. I kind of had a secret goal of trying to break 2:50. So that was kind of like my goal A and B there. Good, Chris. What was your goal going into the race?
yeah, so for those of you who listened last time, I was talking about 15 years ago at Marine Corps was when I set my personal all-time best in the marathon at 3 hours and 11 minutes. So I had it in the back of my mind. That was my A goal. And I was going to work my way up into the starting corral and camp out next to the 3:10 pace group and just hang with those guys and see how long I could go and see if I could take another shot at that. So yeah, I was looking for that PR of sub 3:11.
After I ran Lock to Lock half marathon, I decided I didn't really want to train for a PR in the marathon. I wanted to run a strong marathon. However, as we got close, I just felt that the way I've been running, the training I've been doing, I feel like I'm in shape. I felt like I was fit and that I could go for my PR. Originally, I had just wanted to break 4, but my PR was only 3:58 and some change. So I figured there's not a big difference between those two, so I might as well go for the PR. And I pretty much set my sights on that, figured out what my pace would need to be to end up between 3:50 and 4-hour marathon. And I just tried to hit those paces throughout.
All right. So, whoops, just a little recap there of our goals for last week or for last Sunday. So, Chris, we'll go to you first. So, I know you talked about lining up with that pace group. Did you find them? Did you? Because there were 30,000 people out there. So there are 30,000 finishers. So there could have been 35, 36,000 people out there, and you're looking for one man or woman holding a yardstick with a white sign on it that says 310. So were you able to find that pace guy, girl, or were you kind of on your own there?
Oh, I did. I got into the Red Corral and I worked my way up to the front there, and probably why I had a little less time before I looked at my watch before the start, because I was trying to find that guy with the 310. But yeah, I found him, and there was a huge group immediately surrounding him. He had a pretty good bubble around him, so I just tacked onto the back of that bubble and stood there and waited for the cannon to go off. Said, as soon as the cannon went off, I had a very rookie mistake, and I immediately got boxed out by the flow of the crowd and quickly lost contact with the 310 group, probably within the first 100 yards. And so for essentially the first mile, I was literally just trying to make sure I didn't trip on someone. There were just so many people around. And I think I even mentioned this to Katie last week, that at the start of these huge races, that you can get that moment of panic where it's, oh, I've got to get to my pace right away. And there was no way that was happening for me. I literally just had to calm myself down and be like, I'm okay with where we're at. I will wait till it opens up a little bit and we'll go from there. But my first mile was 45 seconds slower than what I was hoping to average for over the course of the marathon. And I literally had that 1 second where I was like, wow, my day is over already.
Yeah,
But
that could be kind of
fortunately,
scary, right?
absolutely. I was like, in my history of running marathons, my first mile is almost always my fastest mile, because I get caught up with the excitement and the crowd and go, and then I have to dial it back. And I was like, if I'm already starting out 45 seconds slower than I want, where am I going to go from here today? But fortunately, I remained calm and just let the first mile go. And the second mile ended up being a little bit quicker. Third mile ended up being a little bit quicker. And at that point, for those of you who know the course, the first 3 miles are definitely trend uphill over the course of those 3 miles. And then you get a little bit of a break and downhill towards the fourth mile. And so on the fourth mile, I was able to open it up. And at that point, I started seeing that white flag again, right? That I had been looking for with a 310 pace group. At least I thought. Over the fourth to fifth mile, I worked my way through the crowd and caught up to the flag, only to realize that I had caught up to the 315 pace group.
So let me stop you
But
there for a second. So at that
sure.
point, were you encouraged that you caught the 315 guy, or were you automatically like discouraged because it wasn't the 310? I mean, because you had to work pretty hard to get back up there.
I did. But I was pretty proud of myself, like from a mental fortitude position, is I took the approach of, I'm okay with getting to the 315. I knew that if I, at that point, then tried to catch the 310, I was probably going to burn too much energy, and the latter half of the marathon was probably not going to go well. So I made a quick decision, just stay with the 315s, see how it goes. And if in the latter half I feel like I've got the energy, then I'll pick it up and go from there. So I was pretty happy with how I handled the first third of the marathon to get up with that pace group. And once I got with that pace group, man, the miles just started clicking. And I have never run as consistently in a marathon as I did running with that pace group. So huge shout out to my pacer, who just nailed 720 after 720. It was fun to do.
Yeah, good. Katie? How were the first like 6 to 10 miles for you?
When I started, actually, when we got in the corral, I was in the yellow wave and, excuse me, I let you guys go and I was like, this is where I'm stopping. And I think it was that overwhelmed feeling that I didn't even pay attention to where I was. I just knew I was in the right corral. It said 330 to 359. And that to me was where it was supposed to be. And then as it started getting more crowded and we were getting to almost the point that the gun was going to go off, I look up and I'm well behind the 355 pace group. And I was like, no, because that was not my plan. My plan was to line up closer to the 350 pace group. And just to put this out there, I'm not somebody who wants to stay with a pace group. I have trust issues when it comes to pacers. No offense to anybody out there who's paced before, but I've just, it gets in my head. It's more a personal thing for me. When I plan to stay with a pace group and they start getting away from me, or I'm ahead and then they catch up to me, it just messes with my mind. And I start to panic that I'm not with them. But just lining up, I knew, oh my gosh, this is not the pace I want to be. This is going to be slower. I had heard people try to move up in the corrals at Marine Corps, so I should do the same a little bit. I wasn't going to be dishonest with where I wanted to finish as far as lining up was concerned, but I definitely didn't want to be behind where I thought I could finish because I didn't want to get stuck. I tried to work up to the 350, work my way up before the gun went off. I didn't quite even get to the 355, but I just figured I'm not gonna worry about it. And I ran with the 355 pace group in my sights for most of the time, although I wasn't gonna base my race or my pace off of what they were doing. Because again, in a marathon, everybody has a hard spot, right? It's gonna get tough for everybody. And where I have a hard spot, I don't know if that pace group is having a hard spot, or are they keeping consistent times? I don't know. And spoiler alert, the 355 pacer dropped out, like started walking. I passed him with a few miles left, maybe 4 or 5 miles left. He was walking. Also at the halfway point, he was at a 350 pace, not 355. So these are why I have trust issues. You can't put all your eggs in a pacer basket and not pay attention and run your own race. So for my mental race, I don't pay attention to that. But I will say, with as much stress as it was to get to the race and as many people, and again, I've never run this race, I didn't have too much of a hard time in the first 5-10 miles. There were places that it was very crowded, but I guess I had that in my mind at the very beginning, especially it was going to be that way. So I just remained patient. I would say I wanted to stay between an 8:45 and 9-minute pace. I ran an 8:49 in my first mile. I went a little faster, 8:39 in my second mile, 8:46 third mile. The downhill miles, mile 4 and mile 6 were too fast, 8:17s. But I stayed pretty true to what I wanted to do for most of the race. So those first 10 miles, I was hitting the splits I wanted to hit. I was feeling good. There was crowds, but nothing that I didn't expect, I guess. So it didn't faze me too much. I was trying to be patient anyway with my running and my pacing. I think the crowd almost helped me stay like true to what I wanted to do.
Yeah, and I think for me, looking back on the first 10 miles or so, the key for me, I was trying to think about how to put this into words, during the last couple of days. It's kind of hard because I get out there and I just kind of set a pace into my head, and it's like my computer, and that's what I do. Like, I don't know, my goal was to run 6:30s, and I averaged 6:35s, according to Strava. When the course measured 26.2 miles, I was averaging 6:30s, and afterwards with the race, it tells me I ran 6:35s, right? So the first 10 miles, I literally just tell myself to be bored and not get too caught up in the race. And I started right behind our good friend Fogel, and I ran with him for about 5 or 6 feet. And then I said, okay, he can go now, because he he ran 2:33, and he was about 20 minutes faster than me. But I was smart enough to say, okay, those 5 feet, that's enough. I'm gonna run my pace. And I've done Marine Corps enough to know where there's some crowd dead spots, and then where the crowd comes to life. I think around mile 4 they have the NBC 4 station when you're going across that bridge, and it's so loud. And I look down at the watch, and I'm doing a 5:58 pace, and I got to pull it way back, like that's not the time to pull out a sub 6 mile. And get out there on Rock Creek Parkway around mile 7, 8 when we're turning around, and you're running back, and you're seeing literally thousands of people running back at you, and they're cheering for you, you're cheering for them. And just got to stay under control during that time. I was able to see Mario running by, saw Katie running by, somehow missed Chris. I'm looking for people that we know as they're running by, and just trying to cheer for them going on. But yeah, for me, I just trying to stay bored and stay in control of what I'm doing, and kind of have an out of body experience where I don't think about anything. I just count steps and look at my watch and try to do math that doesn't matter yet, because we're only 4 miles into the race. But it's just a matter of knowing what you can and can't do out there. So yeah, I think that was about the first 10 miles for me.
So Adam, up at the front of the pack like that, do you have issues with it being too crowded, or are you able to pretty much get into a rhythm right away?
Yeah, I was able to just run, and I ran my own race. And I mean, I started on the second row of the line, but I still finished 217th place. So I got passed by plenty of people, that's for sure. But yeah, it wasn't crowded. The biggest, I guess, obstacle for us up front, and I mean, I've heard many people under that sub 4 hour mark. The biggest problem would probably be when you're going downhill, and you have the hand bikes are behind you screaming that they're behind you, because you just passed them going up the hill. They're struggling going up the hill. You feel so bad for them. They're just working so hard, and then they get to the top of that hill, and they fly down that hill. And the road's only so wide, so you're trying not to get in their way. You're also trying to run your race. And so that was probably the biggest, I guess, congestion that we had up front. Other than that, yeah, you can kind of spread out a little bit and run.
That's awesome. Good.
Yeah. All right, so let's jump a little bit. What do you guys think was the toughest part of the race? Either
So
one of you.
yeah, so for me, I'm gonna say I started to get a little mentally fatigued around mile 21. For those of you who don't know, that's when you have just come off of the National Monument lawn. So you've run up around the Capitol and come back down by all the monuments, and then you get back on the highway and you're headed across was it the 14th Street Bridge, I think?
So
Running back into Virginia, and there's just nothing out there. You're on
well,
that bridge. There's no crowd on the bridge. Oh, what were you going to say, Adam?
I was going to say, well, actually, the Marines put a water stop out there that was behind a 3 foot concrete barrier with no Marines or volunteers to pass out water. So,
And no cups.
yeah, no cups. So I ran right by it, but I've heard of stories of people trying to get over the barrier, filling up their bottles, drinking out of it, dunking their head under the water. That was about the only thing on that bridge. You're right.
Yeah, and you go through that dead zone after just coming out of that huge amount of energy that you have. Lots of the local run clubs are out there on the lawn. Somebody had this huge bubble cannon, which was fun to run through. There's just so much energy out there, and then you enter this dead zone, and then you're running through that all the way down until you get back into Crystal City. So it's almost probably like 2 miles of just nobody after having all that energy. And so for me, that was the toughest part. And that's where, if you go back and look at my splits, you'll see that I dropped off pretty quick, because apparently I was feeding off that crowd energy a lot.
Yeah, that is a very tough part of the course. Obviously physically, you're starting to get tired at mile 20, 21. And then, like you said, mentally, now you're out there by yourself, right? And there's nowhere to hide on that bridge either. If it's a warm, sunny day, you're in trouble. But yeah, it's the bridge is the bridge. That's for sure. Katie, did you have
Yeah,
a
I would
bump
say
that was
that,
tough?
yeah, I'm not as familiar. This will be the third time at least that I've mentioned this was my first time running. I got to be honest, I didn't see all the things you're talking about. I didn't, like, Adam, you've told me about passing the Smithsonian and passing the different monuments, and I saw the Capitol at a distance. I saw the Washington Monument, but I didn't notice a lot of things on the course. I think I was just so zoned in. And there were times where when you were talking about passing all the people at that one point where you turn around and you get to pass thousands of people. So I was looking for people that I knew the whole time. But then next thing you know, I'd step in a little like crevice in the cement that we were running on. So I felt like I almost had to watch my feet as if I was running on trail because I didn't want to be risking twisting an ankle or something just because I stepped in a little spot on the road. So I was like watching where I was going a lot of the time. Which I love road races, but you do have to watch your footing sometimes because there are those places in the road that can get you in a little bit of trouble. However, maybe if I go back, I'll try to take in the scenery a little bit better. For me, the crowd, I love the crowd, but I also love running by myself. I'm very good in my own head and willing myself forward and doing the diagnostic of how I'm feeling. But I did get tightness in the front of my hip, like my hip flexor area. I got that fairly early on, maybe about halfway through. It was a little worrisome, but it wasn't painful. It was just tight. But as I continued to go through, I just started feeling physically fatigued around 21 miles. So it's funny, Chris, that you mentioned that's where you felt the mental side of it, where I don't think it was as much mental for me as it just was physically. I was hitting all my paces through. I dropped down a little bit in mile 19, came back and got it back in pace up for 20, but then 21 through 25 were outside of the pace that I had been hitting the entire rest of the race, which that in itself, when you're trying to will yourself and you feel like you're still mentally in the race, but your body's not responding, that's tough. But at the same time, you can almost mentally get yourself to keep going through. I knew I was going to be so close to that PR, and I just did not want to let it go. I was unwilling to do that. And I can't explain how the hip thing was something to think about, but then it went away in those last few miles, only to be replaced by some glute pain and calves that were trying to cramp. But that happens to me a lot though, honestly, in races where my calves had that little tingly feeling like if you move them the wrong way, they're going to get you. But try to take in some extra electrolytes and make sure I'm getting the hydration to finish out the race. But I do think it was a physical thing. I need to figure out how to finish up the marathon. It's making it to 20 miles is pretty good, but there's still 6 to go.
Yeah, for me, when you drop down off the bridge and you go into Crystal City and you're seeing people run back towards you, so that means you got to go into Crystal City, make a U-turn and come back. So you're running away from the finish line. And to me, that's just one of those things where I'm like, all right, I want to get there as soon as I can so I can start my way back. And as you're passing the people and you're passing the mile marker sign, I don't know about you guys, but I kind of peek over at my shoulder and see what mile marker they're on, so I know what to expect. And that's kind of what I was looking forward to, dropping down into Crystal City when that mile 21, 22 was getting tough. You could see mile 23 on the other side of the road, and I just wanted to focus on getting to mile 23, feeling as good as I could. But and then from there, it's only a 5K, You've already run 7 of them that day, so what's one more, right? And just and just give it whatever you got left for that
There is
last
something
5K.
there's definitely something about when you have a turnaround like that where you're heading away, even if okay, mile 20, you have just over 6 miles to go. There's something about heading what feels is away from the finish line and having to turn around and come back. For me, the Rehoboth Marathon, the Rehoboth Beach Marathon does that, where you probably, again, only about 6 miles away, but you take this turn and you head away from where the finish line is. And for me, that is so mental that I'm not heading towards home. If it was 6 miles all towards the finish line, I would just mentally, that's so much less stressful and easier for me than turning around and going the opposite direction. Even though it's the same distance, to me, it's just crazy how that can play a mind game with me.
All right, so let's talk about one more thing from the race. So let's go back out there on the course, and we're mile 25 and a half. This is what I always like to remember the most. So you're mile 25 and a half, and you're actually running past where we started the race. And if you look off to the side, it already looks completely different. There's no barriers. There's no porta potties. I think they were gone. I know they're already tearing down the expected finish sign platform banners that are up. So they're already tearing stuff down, but you're running past the part where we were at 3-4 hours earlier. And you know, you're half mile away from turning that corner, going up the hill, kind of seems like a mountain. And then, you get to finish. So Katie, how are you feeling coming into that last turn at mile 26? And then why don't you tell us what your finish time was as well?
Okay, what's crazy about getting back to that start line area was there was an announcer or something there, and he was announcing people's names and where they were from. Not a lot, because there's thousands of us coming through at the same time, but and I was thinking, oh, that must be the finish line. I can hear it. Like, we're so close, because also on my watch, it seemed like I was pretty close to the finish line. But spoiler alert, my watch read 26.62 when I finished. So when I was at 25.6, I still had another mile to go when I thought I was like way closer than what I was. But so we just kept running and just kept running. And my watch hits 26.2. And I'm thinking, okay, I still see people way off ahead of me and I don't see a finish line. So that part felt really long. But you're getting close. You're closer to the finish line. You're within a mile. You're within 3/4 of a mile, within half a mile. You're just have all this adrenaline to where I actually could pass or push myself a little faster back down to the paces I had been running at the beginning of the race, just because I knew I was almost there. But I also knew I was really close to my PR. As that mile that I talked about, 21, 22 through 25, was ticking off, I was like, I'm losing time. This is going to be close. Maybe I just switch my goal back to break 4. I might be in that tiny window between my PR and 4 hours. It's very possible. But when I got closer and closer, I knew that I could do it, but I didn't have any time to spare. I'll say, when you make that turn and you go up the hill, that was a bit of a surprise. I heard there was a hill, but then we hit this place that was like a little bit of a gradual uphill. And I was thinking, oh, this is the hill. It's really long, but it's not that steep. And then I got a rude awakening whenever you're talking about that turn right before the finish line. But I ended up pushing through that. I had a pretty good kick at the end for how I'd been feeling for 5 miles right before that. And I finished with a time of 7 and 40 seconds, I believe is what it was. So 3 hours, 57 minutes, 40 seconds. A PR, the course was a little longer than my other PR, but if we compare 26.2 split to 26.2 split, I was about 2.5 minutes faster than my next fastest marathon.
Congratulations. PRs
Thank you.
are not always easy to come by, so celebrate it and enjoy it.
Absolutely. And part of me was like, oh, I just eked it out. It was just by like really final time. If you just compare the ending time to my last one, it was a minute and a half, something like that. But then Chris, after the race, said, oh, have you seen that pole vaulter? Just keeps PRing by a quarter inch each time. That way he can PR the next time and PR the next time. And I thought, that's a good tactic. Maybe I'll stick with that.
Perfect. All right, Chris, you're up. How was that last half
Yeah,
mile?
so yeah, for me, it was all just guts. Like I had been going back and forth with passing the pace group and the pace group catching me back up. And as we turned the hill to head up to the finish line, the 3:15 pacer and I were right side by side, but he was a little bit lighter on his feet and he managed to get up to the top of the hill a little bit faster than me. Overall, though, super excited and happy with my final time of 3 hours, 15 minutes, and 12 seconds, which is for my age group, a Boston qualifying time. It gives me a buffer of 4 minutes and 48 seconds. For those of you who are comparing that to the 2026 buffer, which was 4 minutes and 34 seconds, you will realize that I am very much right on the bubble, and this is going to be the longest 11 months of my running life, waiting to see whether I'll make it into Boston 2027.
And that, yeah, you are going to be sweating for a while, that's for sure. I'm hoping that
Will
get
you
it.
run marathons between now and then?
Probably, but we'll see.
Good answer. I know for me, that last half mile, I ran mile 25. I think it was one of my faster miles on the course. I saw Jake and Johanna out there. They cheered for me at mile 24 and a half, and that kind of put some pep in my step. You know, it's always nice when you see people you know out there on the course, especially at a big race like that. So I was able to add a little bit there for mile 25, and maybe I added a little bit too much with about a half mile to go. Anytime I felt like I was going faster, I feel my right calf muscle cramp a little bit. So I just kind of at that point figured that going sub 253 was better than having to walk it in and go 258. So I eased back off the gas a little bit and just coasted it up that last hill and just enjoyed that moment going to the finish line. And I was able to finish in 252.29 for my second fastest marathon time this year. So I was pretty happy with that. You know, not quite the 249.59 I had hoped, but you know, I'm happy with it. That's all I can say. It's good. I'm not gonna. I'm too old and too experienced to worry about 2.5 minutes on a marathon course. So when you're running 252 at my age, I think you should be pretty happy with that. So I am.
Some
Yeah. So okay. One more thing about Marine Corps, and we'll try to sum this up in about 15 seconds. So we'll go to maybe I'll do mine first, so you guys have time to think. But I just wanted to go favorite memory from the race. And I'll go first, try to make it really quick. And my favorite memory was something I just mentioned, people that I knew out there on the course, seeing all of the runners that were wearing Tulo Runco gear. There were multiple people, probably 10 to 12 people that were wearing the gear. I saw an old high school friend, Ryan Campbell, who's been supporting me for a few years now, randomly on the course at mile 5. And then Jake and Johanna out there. So just seeing people that I knew out there was my favorite memory. Chris, you're up. And I think I took 24 seconds. So you get at least that much time.
I'm going to say my favorite memory was just probably the last 50 meters, like knowing that I had completed the marathon. This was the first marathon out of all 10 that I've done where I didn't walk a single step. Like I didn't hit the wall. I didn't have a cramp. Like everything just clicked. And so enjoying that last 50 meters as I cruised on into the finish line, seeing that 3:15 on the clock and knowing that was my second fastest marathon of all time, that was a great moment for me.
All right, Katie, what do you got for us?
I'm gonna say ditto to what Adam said with seeing the people. I also had like Michael Kaiser was out there randomly. I knew he was there to support his wife Grace, but I happened to see him, hear his voice yelling for me, and I knew it as soon as I heard him yelling for me from the side. Jenny Hardy, I got to see when we passed, and she just screamed her head off for me like the true hype girl that she is. So that was great. I also loved my moment at the end where I was finishing and I was actually in a lot of pain at the finish, but I had PR'd, so that was good. But my favorite memory, if I can't steal the two of yours, has to be when I was coming through. I got my medal. Again, I'm not noticing any of the sights and the like picturesque backgrounds that all these people got. I'm just trying to make sure my calves aren't cramping up, and like they're just in such pain. And I'm just trying to work my way through getting my medal, getting the other swag they gave out, which was wonderful, by the way. And then I got my picture, and I just saw those pictures today taken with the medal, and I looked happy. But as soon as I got that one picture taken, I was crying. And then my phone was ringing, and it was Adam. And he was on the other end, and he was saying how proud of me he was, asking me where I was, just telling me to just keep walking. We're down just past whatever, and we're waiting for
I was
you,
at
and
the
we're
beer.
so excited for you. Yeah, he was at the
You
beer
knew-
garden.
Yeah, you knew I was at the beer garden. Let's not hide anything.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But you told me to go to the gear trucks, the bag drop
Yeah,
trucks.
yeah.
So that's where you were.
Yeah.
But literally 30 seconds after I hung up, as soon as I hung up, I was just in tears. Because Adam's like my safe space. So as soon as I got on the phone with him, I had been on the verge of tears, but then I'm just like, I'm getting my picture taken. But as soon as I got off the phone, I'm just crying because my calves hurt so bad. And I was a little emotional from being tired, but also getting my PR. It was just all this marathon wonderfulness and pain and everything wrapped up into one. And then when he comes up to me, he's in tears because he's so proud of me. So and then we just hugged and we were both crying, and I was like,
Hey, that's too
proud,
much.
but pain
Over
and
20.
all of it.
That's over 24.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right.
Remember, you invite the woman on here because she's long-winded or something like that. I think there's a meme that you sent me right after the last podcast.
Well, I think one more topic to discuss today on our run here, and we have a race coming up this Sunday. It is Fire on the Mountain, 25K and 50K, and all three of us have run the race before. I took over as race director 4 years ago, so this is our 5th year race directing. It is in Little Orleans, Maryland, Green Ridge State Forest. And like I said, it will take place this Sunday, November. Is that the 2nd?
Second.
You would think
Yes.
I would know this. Okay, November 2nd. There is still some room left. I think we have about 20, 25 spots left. You can sign up on Ultra Sign Up. You can find more information about the race on tulorunco.com. About the race, real quick, the 25K is about 8.5 miles on dirt fire roads, and then you are on the Red Trail in Green Ridge State Forest for about 7.5 total miles. The 50K goes out on the Red Trail, and then you run the Green Trail, and then you go up a hill to the Oasis Overlook area, and then you come back on the Green Trail and the Red Trail. The Red Trail is by far one of the more technical and difficult trails that I've been on, and it allows you to see why the race is called Fire on the Mountain, because you get to climb and descend a mountain. Maybe quickly we can have you guys, Chris, you've done the 50K, correct? And the 25K?
Yeah, I've done both. The last 2 years, I did the 25K and then the 50K last year.
Okay. And
So
so
both are great races. I think the 25K is really good for those who are looking to maybe run their first long trail run. The mix of fire road and trails makes it very approachable. The 50K, though, is a great race. The big difference being you get on the green trail and you've got that long, slow, steady climb up to Oasis, and then you get to come right back down it. It's very runnable, lots of stream crossings, which make it fun, especially if we get all the rain this week. So I think it's going to be a great weekend.
yeah, and we give 5 hours cutoff time for the 25K, and it's a 10-hour cutoff for the 50K. You need to complete the first half and be at the Oasis by noon, because it is pretty challenging to negative split this course. That's kind of our hard cutoff. There are a couple more as you're coming back, but that's kind of the hard cutoff there, and that's just for safety reasons. Most people aren't going to be traveling with a headlamp, and it does get dark earlier with the time change. So about 5:15 p.m. it is almost pitch black. So we want to make sure everybody's back by 10 hours. We've only, I think, ever had one person, maybe two, that have come back just a little bit after that. And, everything was okay, but we want to make sure that people are back safely. So the 8 stations are shaping up to be fantastic. Again, we'll have one with, I believe, a Hawaiian theme, and they'll be out there having a party waiting for our 25K and 50K runners. And then the Oasis is always great. You get to that halfway point and you have your drop bag if you're a 50K runner, and there's, food and drinks out there for you before you get to make your way and come back. So if you're interested in a trail run this weekend, Sunday, we have Fire in the Mountain 25K, 50K. Both races could be a good training run for the JFK 50 miler if you are running that race, or you could just come out and push yourself. We have actually one of our neighbors is running it this weekend, and it's going to be one of his first races that he's done, and his first trail race. And he's already called me 3 times today, and I had to go over to his house to give him a hug to tell him that everything will be okay. So but we have the people that have never done a trail race before, and then we have people that signed up that have done 195 trail races. So it is a good mixed bag of participants for sure. So, all right, anything else you guys want to chat about? No. All right, then next week I think we'll plan on doing a Fire on the Mountain recap at the beginning really quickly, and then who knows what else might come up. And then I kind of thought we would jump into who is Chris Earl, if that's okay. We could figure out who Chris Earl is as a runner and a person, and you guys could get to know him a little bit better. Does that sound good, Chris?
That sounds great.
All right.
Sounds great.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining us, Katie. We really appreciate your insight and your race recaps. And, I think you make the people who are viewing this on YouTube probably give them something a little bit nicer to look at besides Chris and I. So we really appreciate that.
Thank you. I'm doing a hair flip for those of you who can't see.
Perfect. All right. Well, that's all for today's episode of Tales on the Towpath. Thanks for joining us on another run down memory lane and along the CNO. If you've enjoyed the show, be sure to follow, share it with a friend, and leave us a review. We are on all major podcast formats. Until next time, keep your pace steady and your stories flowing.